And hi, everybody. Hi, Cleo. Hi, Kimberly.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. So great to be here.
So glad that both of you are here. We just hit the thing to put us live on Facebook. So I'm going to give Facebook a minute or two to notify people that we are live. So I'll put a little bit of airtime here. And just so you two know, also, we are recording this, so it'll go on our YouTube channel after as well, but it'll reside on Facebook forever too. So that's a good thing. So just real quick, for those of you, I think most people know who Warwick's is, but sometimes we get people who come in from, now with this virtual stuff, we get people from coming from all over the place. So I like to give a little bit of a plug for who Warwick's is. So we're located in La Jolla, San Diego, California. And Kimberly, I hope you don't mind that I'm going to tell people that you actually went to Bishop's and
not
and walked by Warwick's every day for 6 years. So it's kind of a hometown bookstore for you. So I love that. So we're super glad to be hosting you for this. And Cleo's coming to us from Denver by way of New York, where Kimberly and Cleo met. So we've had great connections going on here, and maybe have people from all over the country joining us. So, but if you're in the San Diego area, we are open. We would love for you to come to the store and shop with us. As Kimberly can testament is it's a great bookstore, even if I may say so myself. And I was telling Cleo and Kimberly earlier that my little sign up there says 1896. We're actually celebrating our 125th anniversary this year. So Warwick's has seen a lot of different economic, been through a depression, 2008, 2 world wars, pandemics. I mean, it's really stood the test of time. And one of the things that we're known for is bringing great authors to the San Diego area. So we're even doing it virtually. So I'm so glad that both of you are here and doing this with us today. Real quick, for those of you who are watching, I'll be putting in Kimberly's book into the comment section, so it's easy to click that. We can ship that to you, but if you are in the San Diego area and you want to come by and pick it up, we'd love for you to do that as well. We're also going to, Cleo and Kimberly are going to talk for about 40-ish minutes, 45 minutes tonight, and so put your questions and comments into the comment section, and I'm going to feed those into Cleo so she can bring those in. So we'll be doing those as they come in. So make sure there's lots of ways to participate tonight. So with that, I think I've given Facebook enough time to let people know we're here. So I'm going to do my due diligence and do my intro, and then I'll toss it to you ladies. So Kimberly Ann Johnson is the author of the classic early mothering book, The Fourth Trimester, and has spent the past 20 years working with people and their bodies as a sexological body worker, somatic experience practitioner, yoga teacher, and birth doula. She specializes in helping women heal from birth injuries, gynecological trauma, and sexual boundary violations. She's here today to talk with us about her latest book, Call of the Wild: How We Heal Trauma, Awaken Our Own Power, and Use It for Good. And with her today is Cleo Stiller. Cleo is an award-winning journalist, speaker, television host, and author of Modern Manhood: Conversations about the Complicated World of Being a Good Man Today. And I'll stick that book into the comment section too, so you guys could buy that one too. Cleo received a prestigious Peabody Award nomination for public service journalism and an Emmy Award nomination. Her health-focused television show for Univision's cable news network, Fusion, is the network's highest performing original series. Cleo's work was noted by Harvard's Nieman Foundation for Journalism in its Trends to Watch for 2021. She currently serves as an Emmy Awards judge. Her work receives frequent press coverage, including the New York Times, Fortune Magazine, Rolling Stone, Mother Jones, PBS, ABC News, The Independent, Variety, Self, Essence, and many more. So with that, ladies, have a great conversation, and we'll see you in about 40 minutes or so.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. As Julie mentioned, Warwick's is my hometown bookstore. Bought many books there, got my saddle shoes down the street, and I'm always excited to support my hometown and support independent bookstores. So thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, and thank you, to everyone for coming out tonight. I do want you all to know that we're coming to you through Zoom, but Julie's interfacing with Facebook, and we want this to be a really interactive conversation. So as we're saying things, we'll prompt you like, what do you think about this? Does this resonate for you? Do you have any stories you want to share? Drop them into the chat, and Julie's going to dub it over into our chat over here in Zoom. So the 30-second delay, but this should be really interactive because, you know, we want to hear from you. So I'm going to talk to Kimberly about her incredible new book tonight, Call of the Wild. The anticipation ahead of this book has just been, you know, so wild since Kimberly's first book was a global success. The truth is that Kimberly and I are actually quite good friends in our personal lives. And I know that she has this incredible ability to connect with women in a really unique way. And she speaks from the heart. She's a true master at her craft. And I can just say, you know, at Univision, I covered women's health. And so one thing I know as a reporter is that when we say health in general, what we actually mean is men's health. When you stipulate women's health, men in general will tune out and think that it's not about them. And women's health doesn't often get covered in the same kind of way that health typically does. So it's been really incredible for me, not only personally to be friends with Kimberly, but professionally become, you know, aware of her work. And it's something very special. So for tonight, I just, you know, she's going to do 100 interviews for this book. And usually conversations about new books are very based in theory, very based in concepts. But I really want to talk about the stories that came into this book, the stories behind this book. You know, I want you folks listening tonight to hear these stories and see yourselves in them, so you really understand like the gift that this book is bringing us. So, and again, you know, it's not a very intimate setting, of course, that we're doing here, but let's try and foster something. So we're really looking forward to this, and we'll just start. Kimberly, why this book and why now?
Should I give people a little bit of professional background first, like where I come from?
Yeah.
So I was a yoga teacher, and then I was a body worker. That was after I did my undergraduate. I went to Northwestern and I graduated with a degree in social policy. And then I went in the complete embodiment direction towards my passion. And I had a baby. And when I had a baby, everything that I knew about spirituality and my body and other people's bodies wasn't really working for me. It wasn't helping me heal after the birth experience. I went on a quest to heal myself because the doctor told me I needed a full surgical pelvic floor reconstruction. I really didn't want surgery. It's why I had a home birth. And so in the process of repairing my own pelvic floor, my own overall health, because I was really depleted, I had lower back and sacral pain, all kinds of symptoms that I didn't even know were things before they were happening to me. I started talking to a lot of women and telling them what I was going through. And every woman that I talked to had an experience, whether that was an abortion, a miscarriage, an unexpected health concern, or that was undiagnosable. And they were going around fertility things. Lots of times people would come to me and say, oh yeah, my tailbone's really hurting. And I would say, oh, well, how long has it been hurting? 3 years. What happened 3 years ago? I had a baby. Well, has anyone looked at it or helped you? No. And so I just started realizing this whole realm of experience. And I guess to that point, I'd been pretty lucky because my own reproductive health and sexual health had been pretty good, of just how many women have things that are going on with us sexually, gynecologically, reproductively, and we're so amazing. We just go on with our lives, but behind the scenes, this is what we're working with and dealing with. And so in the process of that first book, which was called The Fourth Trimester, those book signings became like confessionals, and everyone would come up to me and give me the book and then be like, I've never had an orgasm, or I really need your help because I'm not sure what I'm doing when I'm taking the birth control pill. And so over about 3 years, I helped about 800 women in session, hands-on, healing from birth injuries, birth trauma, gynecological surgeries, and sexual boundary harassment and assault type situations. So that's where I'm coming from, is the culmination of that work. I took the work online in 2017 during the second wave of the Me Too, because my session, I got so busy in my individual private practice that people are like, that's amazing, you're so busy. I'm like, no, it's awful. These are how everyone needs help, and I can't help everybody. And so I learned to teach people the process of what I call activating your inner jaguar, which is why the jaguar is on the cover. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. And that's what the book is. So that's where I'm coming from. And then your question is, why now? Well, I think we all know that we're living in a very polarized time. We're reckoning with power in a way that we never have before. Who has the power? How are they using it? We're also coming out of a time of extreme immobilization with this global pandemic, where what our bodies might have wanted and what our minds knew was safe were two different things. And so there's a whole process of, I have an impulse, no, I can't do that. I would normally do this, no, that's not possible. And we're in so many ways having to interpret and reinterpret boundaries, how we're going to be together. What do things like dating look like in a time when all of the rules have changed? And they were already changing, but now they're even closer to the surface. And as many of you who are here know, we're feeling isolated, we're feeling lonely, we're feeling anxious, we're feeling depressed. And the solutions that we have for that are oftentimes biochemical, so medication, or sort of pat things like take a deep breath or take a hot bath. But we kind of have this feeling that maybe that's not an adequate solution to the degree of how much that we're experiencing.
Amazing. I do want to say, at this point for folks, if you are someone who's given birth, if you had a traumatic birth, and feel comfortable, sharing a little bit in the comments about if that resonates for you, if you felt supported by, your birthing team and where you were birthing, leave it in the comments. We'll kind of circle back to that. And I can say, actually, I wasn't sure you would say that. I didn't know why this book right now, but that's really interesting because my book, Modern Manhood, responded also to the call to men to really step up their behavior in the wake of Me Too. And it has been profoundly eye-opening to see how this is impacting individuals so differently based on location and personality and background. Okay, so jaguar. And I do want to say, I have a little cat here who might rear her head. She's my jaguar. But I would love to know, there is a jaguar on the cover. What is the significance of the jaguar?
The jaguar, I lived in Brazil for 8 years, and there was a point during parenting when I was really losing my traction with my ability to provide boundaries for my daughter. And other people were telling me, you're raising a really authoritarian child. And I wasn't noticing because I had a personality structure that was very flexible. And because I am a single mom and there was only one adult and one child, it was easy for me to just go along with what she wanted. So I went to my practitioner at the time, a somatic experiencing practitioner, which is the type of trauma resolution that I also practice. And I had chosen a man that was quite big in stature because I'd realized that in my healing journey, I'd mostly, at least in a therapeutic setting with body work and other things, been working in therapy, working with women. And I recognized that there was a visceral fear that I had with males, even though I had been married and all the things. So in that session, I said to him, I'm so overwhelmed and exhausted. I have to be the unconditional love and attuned and emotional, and I have to be the disciplinarian. And I was feeling kind of sorry for myself. And he looked at me and he said, "You're a jaguar. Look at you. Look at your skin. You're golden and you're spotted. And it's the females that teach the cubs to hunt." And he just kind of fractured in that moment this idea that I had that they were two separate things. Like either you were unconditionally loving and feminine, or you were the more, straightforward masculine. And he was like, it's the female jaguars that teach the cubs to hunt. So that was my first sort of encounter with jaguar. And he said, go home and watch videos of jaguars playing with their cubs and start to play with your daughter like that, so that she gets a sense of your power and that you're in charge, not because of the words you're saying, not because of the way you're bulging your eyes out at her, because viscerally she can feel that you can contain her and you can hold her. So that was the introduction to the jaguar. And then ever since, it's been the metaphor that keeps on giving. As you can see, I have this amazing painting behind me. This jaguar here is actually not the one on the cover, but it looks a lot like that. I was looking for someone to paint a jaguar because one of my courses is called Activate Your Inner Jaguar. And a friend referred me to this woman, Ana Maria Velasco, who's Colombian, and said she paints jaguars. So not like, oh, ask her to paint a jaguar. No, her thing is jaguars. So I met her, and it turns out she lives in this mountain range, which is called Santa Marta in Colombia. It's the most biodiverse region on the planet, so the most amount of species. And the native people that live there are called the Kogi people, and Kogi means jaguar. And the Kogi people spend from age 2 to age 10, the people who are more the shamans, and they don't go outside so that they can develop their relationship to the psychic realm. And she spent a lot of time with the Kogi people. So for me, the jaguar represents wildness, and it represents this aspect of ourself that specifically as females, we get mostly, some of it has to do with our native connective tissue, but a lot of it has to do with our conditioning to be nice, to be kind, to be polite, to be well-mannered, to go along with the program. And as a result, we lose our self-protective responses. We lose our ability to stand our ground and state what we want. And the jaguar energy represents a healthy fight energy. We don't like women that appear, we even interpret things that aren't aggressive as aggressive. And so this book is about what I learned working with all these women, is that many of us have incomplete freeze and flight responses. So situations where we couldn't say what we wanted to say, or if we did, we weren't listened to, movements that we couldn't make freely. And in order to heal them, we have to occupy a healthy fight response. And that's not an alpha female. And it's not someone who goes around bossing everyone else around. It's someone who has a healthy sense of power coming from their center and can trust themselves and therefore become trustworthy.
This sounds like partly physical and partly mental, right?
Yeah. It's more physical, because most people on this call will say like, well, I know this is my body and I know it belongs to me and I know I can make my own choices. But when it actually comes time to be with a doctor who's giving you tons of statistics and telling you, you better do this right now because it's urgent, all of a sudden, where is that ferociousness? It's like, oh, well, I guess I better go along. And we're questioning ourselves and I don't know. And maybe so. So it's really, in my courses and in the book, I'm teaching people how to listen to what's happening in the body, not what we want the body to be saying to us, but what the body is actually communicating to us.
It's so interesting you say that. I was just with a friend who's 5 months pregnant, and her OBGYN had told her 3 months ago, had told her one thing. So she did that one thing. And then 3 months later had chided her for not doing something else. And I said to Victoria, I said, well, that's fine. She'll be fine with that. So I said to my friend, yeah, but she's 3 months earlier told you to do this and you did that. And she said, yeah, I know. And I said, well, did you say that to her? And she was like, no, you know what it's like when you're in a doctor's office, you just kind of like freeze and they're going very quickly. And also, who are you to question a doctor. But then, I mean, again, if y'all want to drop this into the comments, like, has this happened to you? Any tips that you want to share, put them in the comment section. We'll read them out here. I mean, really, like, how many times then you walk out of the doctor's office and it's almost like that commercial campaign for Snickers, like, need a moment, grab a Snickers. Because you walk out the door and you're like, oh, I have like 5 responses now. So
right. Those are real things, because when we're in a power dynamic, and some of the stakes are higher than others, but if you're in a situation where you're requiring someone else's care for you to be safe or to heal, then there's a real power dynamic there. And that's why we saw, the movie Bombshell with Megyn Kelly and all the women in the Fox newsroom. Like, these are very intelligent people, but from the outside, if we don't understand the nervous system, we judge it and we say, those girls are manipulative, or why are they going back to a situation that they knew wasn't good? But it's because it's physiological. So our actual biology, when we're in a position of less structural power, knows that if we're nice, we're less likely to have conflict. And that conflict in that moment feels like it has to do with survival. So we literally think we might not survive, or we will be hurt if we don't keep that threat close to us. And I hope that from the people listening, when you hear that, you feel less self-blame or shame, or less self-recrimination, because a lot of us internalize this and say, like, well, why didn't I do this? Why didn't I do that? Like, what happened? Like, I knew I didn't want that and I went along with it anyway. And that's trauma. So it's our trauma that leads us, kind of zombifies us in a way. And we find ourselves in a similar situation doing the same thing when we told ourselves we wouldn't do it, whether it's a relationship or a kind of a job or a sexual dynamic. And it's just part of being human. But also part of being human is healing and is restoration of these cycles. And I hope that there's people of all genders listening. I know that a lot of people coming to this, maybe, I'm 46, Cleo, you're in your 30s, maybe you're in another generation in either direction. I know my mom thought, like, oh, this book's not for me. It's more for you because it's about sexuality. And she goes, women in my generation, we've kind of already given up on our sexuality. And then as she continued to talk, she said, she just started telling me these experiences, like, oh, well, yeah, when I was a kid, it was just normal for guys to flash you. And if you said something, people would just say, get over it. And then I went and I had babies. And when I went to have a baby, first of all, abortion was illegal. So if I wanted one, I had to go to another state and hide it. Then when I went to, I was her first child. When she went to have me, she just went in and all male doctors, she's 24, and they shaved her completely. And they're not really telling you what they're doing as they do it. And then she has a baby and then she wants to breastfeed. And her mom didn't breastfeed because her mom was encouraged out of breastfeeding to give formula. And then we tend to think of these as separate from our life force or separate from our availability to have a sexual identity or power. But in fact, all of these little, which actually aren't that little, but all of these things that we might think are little, the guy behind us snapping our bra in class. In my case, it was guys yelling across the quad fire crotch to me every day from 7th grade to 10th grade. All of those things build up because there's so much stigma and fortunately much less now than there's ever been to put the responsibility where the responsibility is due. But every time before we've come to this moment that's really important for us to tell our doctor, actually, I don't want that appointment, or just even this, like, I'd like more time to think about it. Or to say yes and then be like, but I don't have to go. I can cancel the appointment. It's my appointment. Like, I don't have to do it. We get in this, we're so incentivized to be obedient, and being good is being obedient, especially as females. But what I do want to say about this dynamic is that another reason for the jaguar is that I had a client come to me, and as I said, I live here in San Diego. It's very warm in the summer. I was working in a dome, and the woman came in with 3 layers of clothes, sunglasses, and a hat, saying that she didn't want to sleep in the same bed as her husband anywhere, but she had no idea why, because he hadn't done anything. And that she had become so sensitive, she didn't even really want to go out of her house much to the grocery store. And she had 3 kids to take care of. And the only thing that had happened was like she had a 3rd child, but there was nothing specific. So when she came to my office, she looked like a rabbit, right? She's totally hidden. She's covered. So I said, okay, how about you be the wolf and I'll be the rabbit? And she was like, the minute I said the word wolf, she started to cower and she got down and her whole body froze. And she was like, I don't know why this is happening. I don't know what's going on. And I was like, it's okay. You're in a freeze. She's like, yeah, I can't move. And I'm like, yeah. So we patiently waited for her body to thaw out with gentle connection of me talking to her as it was happening. And slowly she came out of the freeze. It took basically the whole session of going back and forth and talking and tracking it. And I realized it's not that she doesn't want to be the wolf. It's that her physiology actually can't do it. And so I realized that I could teach her how to do that over a series of, it ended up being 6 sessions. And so that's the process that I take and offer in the book, is even though we might be able to activate our hunter energy in some situations and others we can't. And sometimes we need to repair some of those earlier circuits in order that we have our full availability for what happens in the present moment.
So I'm just thinking here, the jaguar, the rabbit, the wolf, like animals are inextricably linked with the work that you do, but why is that?
Because wild animals don't experience trauma, but humans and domesticated animals do. So this was a discovery in the early 70s by Peter Levine at Berkeley in, the neurobiology medical physics department, was why what's going on?
Right.
Well,
you think wildlife, sorry, but you think wildlife is so much more dangerous than
yes. Wild animals definitely experience life-threatening, devastating events, but it doesn't stay in their system as trauma. And how do we know that? Because they don't demonstrate the behaviors of someone or something that is traumatized, right? Like they don't become immobilized or stop hunting afterwards or never go to the same field where it was that they were hurt before. And the reason why is because they complete the full nervous system cycle. So they go through the cycle of activation and they complete the deactivation, which means that, for instance, if a rabbit's being pursued, it gets extremely threatened. What's going to happen is at first it's going to freeze and it's going to be like deer in headlights and not move. And then if the threat increases, it's going to collapse. So it will go hypotonic. It'll lose muscle tension and it will play dead. But that's its physiology that's doing it. It's not rationally saying, I'm going to now play dead. Its system feels so much danger that it just shuts down. In humans, that's like fainting, wetting your pants, or just not having access to speak. You just can't speak. You're going, why can't I talk? That's not because you're trying to do it. It's because your system has registered that amount of danger. And it's person to person. So what registers as dangerous to you is not what registers as dangerous to me. It's why we can never measure externally how quote unquote traumatic something is. It's an internal experience. So then when the rabbit comes to, because the wolf didn't want it, because wolves don't like dead prey, the first thing it's going to do is it's going to look around with its eyes, the minimal movement. Then it's going to look around with its eyes and it's going to move its ears. And when it senses, feels, hears, smells that it's okay, it's going to come upright in gravity. And then it's going to look around. And then it's going to shake. And it's going to shake, 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 shake. All that stored adrenaline that got shut down is going to shake its way out of the body. And it's going to do whatever movements that it couldn't do before. And then it's going to hop off and it's going to go on its rabbit way and it's going to go eat grass somewhere else. And then it's going to come back to that field whenever it wants to. And it's not afraid of wolves from then on. It's just its rabbit nature.
Wow.
But you can think of how many of those cycles get interrupted all the time because, like the other day I was going to work out and I tripped on the curb and I skinned my knee kind of bad. And then I just went into the workout and it was super awkward because I was going to a Pilates studio where everyone's like really perfect and everyone wears like the right outfits. And I'm already like a real wild card there. And then I was hurt on top of it. So it was like really, and it's COVID. So like no one wants to touch anyone and everyone's like a space and apart. And then I did the class and afterwards, I just was like, oh my gosh, I just did it. Like, why did I go in that class? Like I was hurt. I needed to just sit down and be the rabbit and look around and notice what was happening around me and let my body adapt and my whole psyche catch up to that moment. But why did I do it? I did it because I had already paid for the class, because I thought, oh, you must not be really hurt that bad. It's only a skin knee, whatever. But it was like in that moment, I betrayed what my body was actually asking from me. And we all have so many opportunities to do this in the very basic ways, as like, if you're hungry, eat. If you need to go to the bathroom, go to the bathroom. Like how many of us, especially all this time on the screen, it's like we hold it and hold it and hold it. What are we doing? Why?
Yeah.
Go to the bathroom. So it's like in every moment we have the opportunity to come back and really not only acknowledge what's happening in the present moment, but also acknowledge that we're storing a lot of tension and also numbness in our system based on these earlier experiences. And so when people are like, oh, I'm so anxious, anxiety is actually an incomplete flight response. Depression is an incomplete freeze response. It's not just a neurochemical brain event. It's a physiological state that determines what we think. The actual state, if you're in a fight state, you're going to have irritated thoughts. If you're in a flight state, you're going to have worried and panicked thoughts. If you're in a freeze state, you're going to feel confused and disoriented and not really be procrastinating and not really know what you think about something. And these are all just normal. It's all just part of being human. It's not something we should be ashamed for. We need all of these responses because sometimes we need to flee. Sometimes we need to freeze. Sometimes we need to fawn. But we also want to make those responses conscious so that when we don't need to do those things, we can trust our system. And when we can't trust it, that creates more of the syndromes because our body physically, it's like being anesthetized. If you're on a table and you're anesthetized, your body knows you can't fight or flee. It's in a forced freeze state. And your body, if it can't get away, it's going to register that as a threat. Like, okay, I'm not threatened right now, but if I was, I actually can't do anything about it. And so we have to give it its space. And its space is either connection. So instead of being like, oh, I should get over it, I shouldn't need help, I'm just going to go to this pap smear, close my eyes, and get it over with. We go, no, what would I need to make this a more human experience? What would I need to stay present throughout it? Do I need a friend to come with me? Do I need the doctor to talk to me while it's happening? Do I need eye contact? Do I need to come back another day? Because all of that is the repair in and of itself. It's not like you do it and then it's like right now, whatever experiences each of us has had, and I venture to bet that everyone here is now having lots of popcorn images and remembrances, that right now you can change it just in how you are with yourself now.
I've commented to friends, I know probably a lot of people listening can relate, that particularly, in lockdown, in quarantine, I could go through those 3 stages you described. I could go through that in 1 hour. Like I can just cycle through. It feels so much like, even more so than usual, our systems are under stress. We do have some, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, well, I want to talk about that, but we can talk about questions first, because I think that since we are in this pandemic situation and the social nervous system is such an important part of this book and what a lot of people don't know about, I want to touch on that, but go ahead.
Let's take that first. I just want to say, folks, we're getting your questions. They are great. Hello, Michelle. And we're going to hit your questions, but let's get to this first.
So in high school, most of us learned, when we first learned about the autonomic nervous system, we learned that the sympathetic system is fight or flight, and the parasympathetic is rest or digest. And then polyvagal theory came along in 1994 and said, actually, that's apples to oranges. That's actually not how the nervous system behaves. So there's a few things about it that are really helpful. One of them is under threat, the sympathetic system has a fight or flight response. The parasympathetic has a freeze or collapse response. So that's what we were just talking about.
Okay.
The next thing is that in safety, the sympathetic system is the thing that gives us energy. It mobilizes us. It's that hunting energy. I have drive, I know what I want, and I'm going to get it. And it's what happens out of the cave. And then in the cave is the parasympathetic, which is rest, digest, sphincter opening, softening. And every inhale is sympathetic and every exhale is parasympathetic. If you are in a female menstruating body, every cycle from bleed to ovulation is sympathetic. From ovulation to bleed is parasympathetic. We have these cycles, testosterone cycles differently in a circadian rhythm, in a 1-day cycle. So these are inbuilt. So I think in the popular narrative right now, it's like everyone's like, I'm so fight or flight, and everyone just associates sympathetic as just bad. I just don't want to be in sympathetic. Yes. But actually, for most of the women that I work with, we need to have healthy sympathetic energy. And that's what helps us restore these earlier freeze and flight responses. And you can be very highly functional in life and be overriding all of this. So this isn't like, oh yeah, these people that are not functioning. No, most of you here are probably very high functioning people, and we're still cycling through these things. What I wanted to get to is the social nervous system. It's what less people know about and what is so important right now. It comes from polyvagal theory, like I mentioned. Poly is many, vagal is vagus nerve. And it's the system that developed most recently, evolutionarily. It's in mammals, and it's for maternal bonding. So it's what happens in our facial expressions and our emotions, the tone of our voice, which is called vocal prosody. And it's what conveys safety through the dyad of care provider and infant. So as females with estrogen is a bonding hormone. That means we're very concerned. We are wired to be concerned with what other people are feeling and doing. And we're also wired for group harmony. We are trying to minimize conflict to maximize safety. So that's amazing. That's a superpower. Our culture doesn't really value that at all. We love testosterone, not really fans of estrogen. And the flip side of that is the fawning and the fitting in. So the fawning is being really nice, appeasing. Fawn, right? A fawn has doe eyes. I'm going to make myself seem really okay so that you don't hurt me. And fitting in is camouflaging. I'm not going to stand out. I'm not going to say what I really think. I'm not going to act out of family or social norms, or else I might get my head cut off, or I might get ostracized. And as I mentioned earlier, it's a survival function. It's not, people say, oh, it's so manipulative. It's not a rational mental choice. It could be, you could choose to do that, but it's how we reckon with power. And so hopefully, again, when we're talking about coming out of a time of extreme threat, danger, and immobilization, a global pandemic, sheltering in place, stay in your house, don't go places, maintain distance from people. That is we needed to do that. Our minds knew that, but our bodies don't understand that. And as mammals, bodies need other bodies. So in fact, Cleo has her cat, which she's calling her jaguar, and she probably learns a lot about jaguar energy from the cat. But what the cat's helping her to do is connect and soothe her social nervous system, because she has touch and contact with another sentient being. So plants, animals, nature are all master regulators. Yeah. And humans need other humans. So when we're blaming ourselves for feeling lonely or exhausted, right? A lot of people around me are like, I'm so exhausted. Why am I so exhausted? I'm like, because it's freaking exhausting. It's exhausting managing not only the amount of energy that's flying around, but we're animals. We can sense all the other people's anxiety, frustration, rage, right? All of these emotions that are actually completely proportionate to what's happening. But we want to learn how to care for ourselves and recognize where we're at in these systems. So my real hope for, I have a lot of hopes for the book, but one of them is that we choose people over screens when we are able to. And that even though that's going to be hard because we've spent so much time relating to only half of a face, which if you remember at the beginning felt really weird. It feels really weird to only see half of someone's face, especially for people with medical trauma, especially with people who are highly reliant on the social nervous system. I ventured to bet it was weirder for women than men because we do have that estrogenous feature. But then we get used to it because we can also adapt to things that aren't good for us, which is another vestige of trauma. And so we're going to have to remember each other into the need for proximity, the need for closeness. My book starts with a story about my daughter moving to the US from Brazil, where she said, she went to school, and in Brazil, she would just dogpile her friends and her teacher, and they would just roll all over each other in first grade. And then she came here and she kissed her friend on the arm, and her friend ripped her arm away and said, "Ugh, germs, that's not allowed." And this is before the pandemic. So we were already a culture trying to reckon with our basic human needs of being around one another at a time when a lot of these structures like marriage and traditional family structures aren't coming together in the same way that they used to. And I'm hoping that this book offers those skills, either if you're just interested in it for yourself because you struggle with isolation, loneliness, depression, anxiety, maybe even PTSD. If you've had some of these female reproductive stuff, which is probably almost everyone. And there's not a lot of trauma books out there written by women because we're seen as derivative. It's seen as the male body is the standard for medicine. And oh yeah, if you do this for women, or yoga is for this. And if you have your period, take a day off. But in fact, as I've said, in the social nervous system, as females, we operate differently. And it's important that, all of these things like reproduction, that is not just something that it's such a place where there's so many cycles and so much potential for interruption, but also so much potential for repair.
Amazing. We've had some comments come in. Michelle saying it's protective. Absolutely. And Arlene wondering, what is the best way to get in contact with you directly, which I'm sure so many people are wondering now. So what is the best way for folks to get in contact?
You can go to my website, KimberlyAnnJohnson.com, and you can write to me at admin@KimberlyAnnJohnson.com.
Okay, great. And if folks would like to contact me, it's cleostiller.net. I think we can probably get to some of the questions that have come in now. So Arlene had a question. Does the guidance in the book utilize somatic therapy? And I'm hoping that if you don't mind just explaining what somatic therapy is, that would be great. If so, she says, what types of physical exercises are used? Personal anecdote from her. I suffer from terrible vertigo and am limited in how I position my head and eyes as they trigger episodes. So maybe more broadly, you can answer what kind of physical exercises will folks get if they snag this great book?
Mm-hmm. So yes, my background is somatic therapy. What is somatic therapy? It's easiest to describe in the doing. It's hard to describe it. But I guess how I would say is if this woman who had come to my office that was incognito had gone to talk therapy, they would start talking about it and asking why. Well, why do you think that? And what happened? And they would go excavating for what are the triggers? What are the dots? What's your relationship like with your mother? All these things. Whereas I'm going directly to just what the body is actually saying. And so in this case, I was offering an exercise of wolf and rabbit that's nonverbal. So we wouldn't even be necessarily talking. We would be acting out something and letting and seeing what the body does. Sometimes I work with touch. Obviously, that wouldn't happen in the book. So there are exercises that include the eyes. There are exercises that don't include the eyes. You know, like anything, sometimes we have to go, it's like the hair of the dog. We have to take a homeopathic dose of the thing that we don't want. So for instance, if someone has a lot of depression and is in a really deep dorsal state, I'm not going to just go and say like, hey, why don't we go jump around and do jumping jacks? It's like, I have to match their state and allow their system to slowly thaw out in certain circumstances. And we go through waves of activation and deactivation. But what it will give you is the tools for you to track your own experience and communicate from the present moment experience. And I saw someone said, how does my work differ from Peter Levine's? So Peter's one of my teachers. He was also a Rolfer. So he studied with Dr. Rolf, who was also one of the lineage holders that I work in. And my work is different because I integrate sexuality. So in somatic experiencing, things are really focused on, well, in fact, of my entire 3-year training, there was a half of a day for sexuality. So that was one of the reasons why I went into the work I did, because there's so much fixation on extreme trauma. And yet all of us have these boundary repairs. And it seems absurd to me that we aren't including these power dynamics in the work that we're doing. So I'm teaching with Peter next month, May 15th and 16th. And I'm hoping, you know, we could see an absence of education as a kind of a trauma, right? If we're all swimming in sexual shame soup, where sex education is only reproductive oriented, if we get any at all, and there's nothing about pleasure and there's nothing about how arousal works, I don't see how we're going to get out of that other than pure sheer luck in a good way, when we don't have any language to talk to people about what we're ready for, what we might want. So my book is from a female perspective, and also from this perspective that healthy aggression, you know, when someone's in a position of structural power, whatever that is, we really can't imagine what the person in less structural power is doing to manage their energy to be around us, because we're the normal. So I've noticed with most of the male practitioners, they just really don't get it. And frankly, you know, every birth experience is a major experience. I don't think it's always traumatic, but any woman you talk to who's given birth, that's an experience that's going to mark your life. And things that happen at the birth are things that you're going to take forward with you. And to just imagine that births, abortions, miscarriages are all a specialty, even though 80% of the practitioners are women, is just crazy to me. So all the examples in my book are about women. I opened the book also with the first chapter, the story about my daughters in the intro, with a pregnant woman. That in of itself is radical, because we think, oh, well, that's like a niche experience, right? But it's actually not.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We talked a lot about that at Univision as an all-women health team covering health. You know, to be able to tell women's stories, they wanted to sequester us, and we were, you know, didn't have that. I do think that if anyone else has any comments or questions, pop them into the comment section. We're coming to the end of the evening. I do want to, you know, is there any other story that comes to mind where you would want to wrap this and leave this conversation?
I'm just kind of going through the files of stories and my own stories, because I think telling the healing side of things is really important, because a lot of people don't want to go there. They're afraid to do this work because they're afraid it's like Pandora's box, and if you open the lid, then there's just everything's going to fly out and their whole life is going to have to change. And if we do this work well, we don't actually, it's not like psychoanalysis or therapy where you have to go back and talk about every single thing that's happened to you in your life. You can just be in the present moment with what arises, and everything that we need is actually here for us right now in order to do this repair. So I like to really focus on positive reparative experiences, which are like, if you've had a sexual abuse history, some things that can be really impactful are going to a doctor's appointment where someone does listen to you, right? Because it's still your pelvis, and you're still dealing with authority. And sometimes we need a practitioner or someone else to do it. But when I teach courses, it's just so healing for everyone to have a space where it's not group therapy. It's not like a trauma pit where everyone tells their worst stories. It's like a place where people come and really have aha moments of like, oh, I didn't know that then, and I know this now. And now when my kid puts their hand up my shirt, they listen to me the first time I say no. Now when someone gets inappropriate with me on the dating app, I don't feel compelled to respond and maintain a conversation. I just drop it and I can make a boundary. And actually now the majority of the women that I work with are finally able to tell their partner what they do want, because they've spent so much time telling them what they don't want that they haven't even been able to decide, well, what is it that I do want? And their partners are actually very willing and eager to listen. They're just so frustrated because they're like, I'm trying to be a good person. I don't want to be an asshole. And I'm waiting for the code. And so I feel like the book actually helps you find your own code and helps you contextualize, why are you cringing or moving away when before you wouldn't? Why do certain movements or positions make you feel afraid? And then you can just communicate from what's happening rather than, or like relationships to porn. If you feel like your partner is doing something they learned in porn, instead of being like, you're a disgusting jerk and you must not like women and you must not respect women, you're like, oh, it looks like you learned that from porn. Like, is that right? And so you just can actually meet the situation where it's at.
Amazing. Amazing. The last question of the evening would be, where can we hear more about your work? Are you doing any podcasts or future interviews?
So I have my own podcast, the Sex, Birth, Trauma Podcast. So you can find that on iTunes and anywhere. And I've interviewed some of the people that I've mentioned. Stephen Porges was recently on it, the author of Polyvagal Theory. I was recently on Mark Devine's Unbeatable Mind podcast, which was a fantastic conversation because he's a commander Navy SEAL. So kind of the ultimate in over exaggerated jaguar energy. And so it's sort of like the ultimate in yang talking to the pretty far extreme yin, but really heartful, honest conversation. I loved that conversation. Gosh, I've been doing a ton of podcasts. I'm on the Skin Owl podcast. Annie Tevelin, Off the Record, was a great conversation. That's coming out on Monday. She was fantastic. I am on the Relationship School podcast. I've been having great conversations with men because I'm like, okay, so there's me too. So is there going to be an I did it? And like I teach activate the inner jaguar, are you going to teach activate the inner rabbit? Is that what's going to happen? So, I'm interested not just in, I realize that helping women is happening in a context, but my experience has been the more power we own, the doctors, the people in positions of authority actually appreciate it when we come from our center. It's just that when we're in a fight or flight response and we're projecting that outward with our moral outrage and indignation and frustration from every other thing, they're responding to our nervous system, not responding to what we're saying.
Yes.
So you can go to my website. It's mostly updated. If you're in San Diego, we're having an event on Saturday, an actual in-person event to gather, which is really thrilling. One of our first ways of building a social nervous system as a community. And thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Cleo. Thank you, Julie.
That was amazing. What a great conversation. And thank you, Kimberly, for all your work. And your ongoing work. I dropped in your podcast, the one that you do, I dropped that into the chat so that people can go to that. But I think going to tell us again, both of your websites so people can go and find, Cleo, why don't you start? And
Great, mine is cleostiller.net. And if you head over there, a pop-up will come up, put your email address in, and it will send you an excerpt of my favorite chapter of my book, which is a really, really wonderful companion piece to Kimberly's. And I would love to just hear from you. Fantastic. In general.
Excellent. And Kimberly?
KimberlyAnnJohnson.com. And if you put your name in there, you can get the first chapter. But you know what? I mean, just get the whole book. You want the whole book. I mean, but read the first chapter. It's really good too.
Well, they can read the first chapter while we're shipping them their book.
That's fantastic. How about that? Because if you're feeling anxious to get it, then yeah, you can satiate that and read it right away so that you have some time for Warwick's to send you your book.
Excellent. Well, ladies, thank you so much. It was insightful and informative, and can't wait to hear more from both of you. So I'm going to say goodnight to Facebook. Thank you, everybody. And to YouTube, if you're watching us on YouTube, thank you for joining us here and for supporting these wonderful authors and Warwick. So good night.
Thank you.
And so we'll take us off.